everyone. On behalf of Alumni Relations Committee, we welcome you all to the first ever web series of SCIT, the Alum Reels. I am Akanksha Jangir.
And I am Vibhuti Sharma.
Here we present you something unique, something different that fades away your doubts and surprise you with highly intellectual alumni and their stories of wisdom.
Every question of yours is important, and finding the right answer from our esteemed alumni is our priority. So, not to keep you much waiting, let's warmly enjoy the first episode of Alum Reels.
As promised, we don't fail to surprise you by welcoming our esteemed alumni, the pride badges of Symbiosis Center for Information Technology, Pune. Here, we take the honor of inviting our first guest, Ms. Ritvika from the batch of 2011, who is currently working as a security governance, risk and compliance lead at Accenture. Ma'am holds the balance of passion and profession with 10 years of industry expertise as management consultant in the fields of security governance, risk and compliance.
Stepping ahead, she is a published author of 8 storybooks, an award-winning short film director. We would also take this opportunity to congratulate Ritvika ma'am for being nominated for Padma Shri for her esteemed contributions. Ma'am, SCIT Alumni Relations Committee welcomes you to the first episode of Alum Reels, and it is such a great pleasure for us to meet a technical expert, a published author, and a short film director.
Well, thank you so much for that illustrious introduction. I am not very sure whether I deserve that kind of an celebrated kind of an introduction as an alumni, but by heart I am an SCI citizen what we typically call, and I still today miss the college life, our campus life, and I am really feeling great to come back to you and have a direct connect.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And we hope that you're enjoying the moment of taking the pride as SCIT alumni.
Of course, no doubt about that.
I agree, ma'am. Ma'am, we would also like to hear more from you if there are a few interesting questions from the current batch, from the students, which we are waiting to reach you to get answered. So, ma'am, the very first question would be, what are your views on information security? How effective is our cybersecurity strategy at addressing business risk?
That's a good question. One thing which I feel personally, after being there in the industry, like spending around 10 years in the core security strategy and auditing domain, is that technology is never fixed at one point. Every day a new technology is coming up, and with every new technology, new risks are bubbling up. So we as security consultants or security auditors or security professionals as a whole, the entire fraternity has to be right on the toes at every moment, and we have to start planning ahead of the breaches. So that's the main point which we at the corporate side, we are really working day in, day out to be on top of the technology, so that even before the technology is up, we are ready with our strategies from a security standpoint. Now, coming to the risk is something which is not what is at present. It is about your future. How do you visualize the threats from a current technology or a future technology, and how are you going to take a safeguard against it? Typically, I am avoiding some of the jargons which we use in the classes and theory papers. I'll be using more terms which we are commonly using in the industry and the corporate sector nowadays, because I'm sure you must have heard about various new strategic initiatives which at corporate governance level people are taking off and talking of. Also, with every new year, we are almost getting a new auditing standard, new technology standards coming up. So the first thing which I would like to suggest right from the beginning of your student life as an information security graduate or maybe an information security professional, the first thing you should be preparing about is how do you approach a risk? think out of the box. Don't restrict your thoughts just within the pages of a book. Look up, look outside, look into your handheld devices, the gadgets you have. They are the best teachers. Try to exploit that. No, by exploit, I don't mean that try to do something which is really not acceptable or something illegitimate or something, but try to use your curiosity to know what is beyond that technology, whatever technology it is. Smartphones or any smart gadgets are very good teachers. Why do I say this? Because any technology, as we all know, is always self-directed. That's a defunct role. For example, whenever we are developing a strategy, a technology, new technology or a new device, or maybe a very technology started initiative, I will say even a device is an initiative at the R&D stage. So a device becomes a device much later when that strategy gets implemented. So whatever it is, whenever you are starting to handle or use this, the basic default functions are always directed to the user. This is done to prevent any kind of misuse by the user should not impact the public as a whole. So this is a very important thought which as a security strategist we must be thinking and propagating. That is what is I personally feel that is very important to understand, that if you are not well aware of a new device, technology, whatever you call it, you should first know what are the pitfalls of it so that you take sufficient safeguards against this before starting to use, so that you will actually secure yourself in the long run. Now this you can be, if you are doing this for your client, this you can be the team who are managing this. If you are doing it for yourself, the personal security factors will also get taken care of. So whatever this you, actually I'm not very sure by as us and you what exactly you want to mean in the question, but this is how I interpret it. This is very subjective in any ways. So risk is always futuristic. Try to be well ahead of time with your thoughts and try to be curious with what you have so that you can think what is coming beyond. Does that answer your question at all? I'm not very sure.
Yes, I'm definitely does.
Talking about risk analysis, how a risk impact analysis is done in an organization and what factors are taken into consideration as to decide if the risk is high, moderate or low. Also, ma'am, apart from the ISO and NIST, are there any other risk framework that are currently being adopted by the industries?
Well, the risk impact analysis is actually broadly divided into two steps whenever we're doing it on the ground. The first is called typically business impact analysis or BIA. And the next stage is CBA, it's cost benefit analysis. So what we do as part of BIA, we try to find out what are the assets we have. That was an old ISO standard. We used to start with an asset inventory and then try to find out what are the asset values, what are the risks and what are the threats, how likely it is to recur, and corresponding formula and everything we have to do. But now what we are doing is we are trying to do a reverse approach. How are we doing? We are first dividing risk into two different segments, external risks and internal risks. So that's all basics. This external one, this corona thing, this pandemic has really opened our eyes in terms of evaluating the external risks. Now, how do we see a pandemic? It's typically an external risk, right? But if your employee is getting impacted, if your key personnel are getting impacted, then that becomes an internal risk. So how do you classify a pandemic is the biggest question now. Is it an external risk or it's an internal risk? So there are different schools of thought which have come up. We are still in discussion as to how do we classify these kind of risks. For example, a pandemic, which is human born, and still there are no such available solutions or recommendations or whatever way you can reduce this risk at this moment. So this is a gray area, of course. Other than these, we can classify clearly into either internal risks and external risks. within internal, what are the risks, possibilities that my assets, my people, my infrastructure, as a whole, my company or my client or my subject area, whatever, because you must be knowing, like, risk management is not done for one particular segment. It can be even done at a tool level, it can be done at a function level, it can be done at a program level, or even at the company level. So for whatever subject you are doing this risk management, what are the internal and external factors which can impact the viability and survivability of that particular asset? Now, coming to the external ones, this is quite a gray area, because anybody will try to say this is not within my scope of action, so I'll put it as an external risk. So how do you define that? For that, we have auditors, we have counselors, we have security managers to help the respective team who is doing this risk management. So typically in the big MNCs like TCS, or for that matter, IBM, for Accenture. So for large organizations, we already have a defined role called risk officer. This risk officer is different from DPO. DPO is a different role, to just don't get it confused with that. So risk officer's duty is that they will help the respective team who is doing this risk management activity in finding out what is external and internal to the subject. At times, as per ISO, we call it the interested parties. Interested party is a key phrase nowadays, as per ISO, of course. So once we are done with identifying who are the interested parties, who are the stakeholders, internal, external, we'll be in a very clear position to understand who owns what. So the first step towards risk management is identify the risk officer. Once the risk officer is identified, he will help you to understand what is internal risk and what is external risk. Once internal and external risks are identified, you are already trying to map it with the respective assets or the respective worth which is at stake. So once this assets evaluation has been done, you know how to convert it into an RPN, risk priority number. If a particular threat, you understand that the chance of recurrence is very high, so the probability is basically very high, so that will automatically become a high risk factor. But there again, a priority scale comes up. The asset value associated with that particular risk being executed, how high is that asset value? If that asset value is not that high, if it's a medium valued asset or if it's a low valued asset, then the risk factor will definitely be low. So basically what you can see here, I'm trying to get into a formula, which is a typically industry approved formula, and every client segment, industry, and everyone is using this formula as per their applicable areas, years of applicability. So this formula is typically called as RPN calculation, risk priority number. That number we generally put it on a scale of 0 to 100. Anything within 20 is called a negligible risk, 20 to 40 is low risk, 40 to 60 is medium risk, anything beyond 60 is high risk. And if it is close to 100, like 95 to 100, it's a critical risk. So within 20, if any risk comes, we generally do not take any actions. If it is beyond 20 and up to 100, then some recommendations, security solutions are recommended by the risk officer and information security manager as a whole. In many small organizations, you will find these two roles are delivered by the same person, but the roles are different. So the responsibilities are also different. So you get a set of recommendations. There, every solution, every security solution deployment comes with a cost. So there comes the next phase. Once I have the RPN calculated for all my risks, now what I have to do is a CBA, so cost benefit analysis. What is my cost of implementation of a security control versus what is the benefit I'm getting? How much I am covering my assets at risk? So this analysis is being done and a clear-cut report is generated, and as per that report, it's a final senior management responsibility, or senior manager or CSO or even board managers may finally take a call that which are the assets, which are the risks I'm going to cover with these solutions proposed and what I'll accept it. So risk, whenever you have, as we all know, you must be knowing by this time that there are 4 options which we can actually, a final result of risk management will be 4 options, whether you accept this, transfer this, you can reduce it in whatever way. So mitigating it or accepting it is the main decision point which is taken by the senior management. As per our responsibility, we always consider it that yes, this is my risk charter, this is my recommendation list, and this is my CBA report. Now you take your call, how do you want to take it forward?
And that was very informative. The next question. So ma'am, as you know that we are doing our MBA, so what are the auditing standard skills that we should learn while pursuing our MBA? And if you could brief us about some glimpses of industry standards which are being currently followed in information security management domain.
See, ISO and NIST. So that's like bread and butter. ISO 27001 series and NIST. So let's not get into that. And SAIT is a master in creating ISO specialists. So ISMS is the baseline. But nowadays we are spending a lot of time in data security, data protection, and data privacy. So even in India, we are going to have our data privacy law for the first time. So that is a big change which the entire world is going through. So as a security auditor, if you're planning your career in that spectrum, then I'll definitely suggest you should be spending a lot of time in GDPR if you are trying to cater to the EU domain. In HIPAA, of course, if you're planning to take care of the patient health records and all the patient-related, health-related PHI, basically if you're looking into protecting the PHI, personal health information. If you're planning to be an auditor in the PCI field, that's a payment card industry field, then in that case, PCI DSS is a very important standard. It is already one of the leading factors basis any payment gateway solution is evaluated today. The security again is judged in a PCI from two different aspects. One is the data security standard and the other is the network security as well. It is not called, in case of a PCI DSS, which is never called that it is being evaluated on the basis of network. But why network is important? Because whenever you are using a payment gateway, if it cannot be an offline, right? It cannot be an offline function. There has to be a network on either side of the gateway. So how do you manage that network is also very important. So PCI DSS standard will evaluate both the sides of information, the network as well as the data at rest. And of course, GDPR and cloud security. CSS Star is being one new standard which is taking some good exposure in the last, I'll say rather last 3-4 years. So that is mostly a cloud security standard and it is being proposed by CSA, Cloud Security Alliance. So CSS Star is the name of the certifications. You can definitely plan of a lead implementer or a lead auditor role, and the certification, of course, you can take that up. Next is GDPR, as I already said. It has replaced the EU DPA, the Data Privacy Act, which it had earlier. Next is HIPAA, and of course, ISO and NIST standards. And one more is coming up. In fact, I'm not sure if you are already guys a member of DSCI, Data Security Council of India, you'll see that I was there in the NASSCOM office last year. In fact, this January, there was some regular meeting which we had there as a data security counselor. So what we have done is lead privacy officer or the privacy office is actually coming up. So for the India data privacy law executives, this will be a very sought after skill. So in case if you are planning to take up data privacy, data security or data protection as a whole in your specialization rather, I'll say, then you can think of this kind of certifications. It can be, till now it had always been a classroom certification. I don't know, maybe this time they will be having some digital interface as well. So you can plan to start working on those. So as an auditor also, it will help you to understand how these frameworks work and how do you judge. So it's a very clear-cut checklist-based evaluation you can do.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, moving forward to the next question. While doing risk management, what are the cost factors that a company looks in?
The main cost factor is the cost of deployment. That is the biggest thing. It is often said that if the cost of deployment is around 20 up to 20% of the cost of data bridge or a overall information bridge, then generally that is always accepted. That is implemented, basically deployed. But if the cost of deployment is more than 20% of the data bridge, then it is the management's call whether you will go for it, negotiate it, increase your residual risk in whatever way you do it. So that is but there is no thumb rule for that. I cannot say that yes, agar 20%, if it is within 20%, you will go yes and you will do not and do this, do that. No, but that is just usual best practice in the industry, I can say.
Okay, ma'am, and that was quite informative. So, ma'am, our next question is, in this era of so many certifications and online learning courses that are available, should we still consider the traditional method of getting a degree like MBA or post-graduation to rate our knowledge? And how to go about preparing for any information security profile in that case?
Well, I'll say there is no substitute for regular education. There is no substitute and there can never be. Online certifications or whether any kind of certification, I'll rather say, is more like it's a topping on the ice cream. If you don't have an ice cream, the topping has no value. Simple. So coming to the point, the online certification, because you cannot compare, in my opinion, a regular degree like MBA, that too, in whether that can be the same as a certification. So that is clear cut. My answer is no. Now coming to the second part of your question is, if you are planning your career in the technology side of security, for example, some tools, maybe it can be an SAP, because I'm taking the name of SAP because Bharti sir is a mastermind in bringing up our college's SAIT's knowledge base on SAP HANA and other streams. So if you're planning your career in the technology side of security, there are Archers, there are EGRC modules, there are Risk Fabric, there are multiple data masking, data protection kind of tools are there. Even there are, IBM has, IBM and Informatica are leaders, market leaders in that, and they're bringing up a whole bundle of information security based tools like Guardium and all. So if you're planning on the technology side of your career, then yes, certifications are very important, because every tool will come with their tool-based master certifications and beginners courses and so, admin guides and everything. So that is a good top up on above your regular degree. Coming to the management consulting side, another side of security is becoming an auditor, becoming a security manager, becoming a security professional, and basically consulting the senior management about the security in the security strategy space. In that line, yes, certifications like CISA and all these ISC square certifications are extremely important. But again, keeping the SCIT curriculum in mind, we are well ahead of the certification syllabus. That is what I have personally found in my career, that the subjects and I'll say I don't like to restrict it within that the curriculum we follow. It's more beyond that, because it's very industry facing course which we actually follow in SCIT. Here we are learning much beyond the books, like exactly what we are doing now. We had been doing this, the medium was different in our times, but this is what we have been doing for a very long time. We are always talking to industry, we are always inviting industry to come and teach us what is going in the market, and accordingly our syllabi has been actually designed. So I am really thankful to the directors and the core management of SCIT who has been designing the courses which we have. So SCIT has been creating two different ladders of security professionals, one going to the technology side like TechArch, security architecture review and all these things, and the other channel is like the ladder of the management consultants, like I have chosen my life in this. So you become a security auditor, you do security consulting, you provide your security strategies for your clients or senior management. So that's a field. So that is where I'll suggest. So you have to choose what's your calling area, where do you want to excel, and in which domain you find more interest in. So you have to choose your certifications accordingly. There is no plug-in kind of a thing in security wherein you choose that, okay, I want to become this, I will do this. There's no such formula here. And online or classroom, online, in my opinion, I find it more like a self-learning, even if it's an instructor-based course. Like, it is your decision, your mind status, how much you want to extract, how much you want to learn, how much you want to see yourself in depth into the course. But coming to the classroom and the physical classes, I think it is always better, even if I might really sound very traditional with my thoughts. But yes, classroom trainings, classroom sessions has always its own magic. And the way you can connect directly to people, is directly to your teacher or mentor, it's always better compared to your online sessions. That is my personal thought. But yes, keeping the current pandemic and other risks, this is also will be a part of SCIT, or for that matter, any education house's risk management report should reflect this, that if the classes are not physically possible, then how are you going to manage the entire show digitally without impacting the overall schedule? So right, so that is one point. So that's how it can be a temporary solution. Of course, we should not be stopping the flow of knowledge from one side to the other because of other externalities. But yes, but in the long run, I think the physical classes will be more important. And of course, degree, as there's no second substitute for me.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, that definitely has given all of us some clarity. Moving forward to the next question. What is the accounting advisory job like in any big accounting firm? What are the different roles in risk advisory services, and how are these roles helping an MBA student to shape a better career?
Okay, yeah. So accounting advisory directly doesn't fall under information security. This is kind of a handshaking area of work wherein we work with cost accountants and also the CAs who get absorbed in these roles. You see that background verification and accounting frauds are a team who handle these checks for these. So BGC is typically managed by the HR team, and accounting frauds are typically managed by the accounting team. Now, both these teams, at times, whenever it is required, they take help of information security professionals to check whether there are any documentation frauds, documentation level checks are required, or any kind of data breach which might have happened. So in the investigation, like it's a security incident has been raised, so nobody knows what actually has went wrong. So then the security professionals are at times called in to investigate the overall matter with respect to a security standpoint. So that is one which I can say, but I don't think I'm a right person to answer this question. Like accounting advisory, to be honest, I have not worked much.
Thank you, ma'am. That gave us a better clarity, undoubtedly, because even we were learning from that. So, ma'am, my next question would be, so you have achieved a lot in your career, undoubtedly. After MBA, you started with Tata Consultancy Services, and now that you're a part of Accenture, more than 6 years. Your entire journey is a learning process for all of us, ma'am. So if there is anything that you would like to brief us on, be it any kind of mistake that you would call, or anything that you would want us not to repeat. So if you could shed some light over that, ma'am.
One thing, I passed out in 2011. When I joined TCS, or rather when I joined my first job, I really did not have clarity at one point that what is ahead of me in the next 5 years in the security domain. The security as a whole is an ocean, and there are multiple roles, multiple profiles, and multiple technologies, multiple specializations which are available in the market, and it's an ever-growing thing. You cannot restrict security within 2, 3, 4 domains like that. So with time, it keeps evolving, and it's quite new as a domain compared to overall IT infrastructure. So that is one confusion in which I spent my initial 2 years, what I want to be in the security domain itself. And then slowly, as I started working I joined as a security strategy member. And SSM typically was my role, like security strategy manager in the shared services group. So then, as I started spending months times with my new assignments, new auditing standards which were coming in, and new clients, meeting new teams and people, there I got to know what I should really aim to become in the next 10 years. So what I'll suggest you from day one, you should be, whenever you are exposed to information security domain, you should first start learning that what are the different arenas that comes within security, like cyber security, network security, data security, cloud security. There are privacy is also coming up very fast. So how do you want to look? Physical security, sorry, I missed that. So which one is your calling? And accordingly, you start preparing from day one. You can't guarantee that you will get a job in the ladder you like it from day one, but at least first 2 years you can always give in learning. But slowly you grow up, you can start channeling your skills. You upskill yourself in such a way that you get a job in which you want to get in. So understanding what is security, what comes under security, what doesn't come under the scope of information security is also very important. So that will be my suggestions too.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Moving to the next question. Ma'am, you have excelled being a writer, director, and management consultant. But is it really possible for an individual to justify 100% in multitasking? If it is, can you please suggest those methods to apply in real life for us?
Well, I am a diehard follower of Sir Edward de Bono. And with due respect to him, you can wear different hats at different hours of a day. So whatever you want to do apart from your work, you should be very focused in that. Yes, I want to do painting, I want to do write, I want to do this, I want to do that. And just divide your hours, and whenever you're doing one task, do that task itself. So multitasking, of course, it's possible if you at all want to do that. And second thing is, multitasking is often misinterpreted as parallel tasking. No, you don't do multiple jobs at one time. You divide your hours, 24 hours in a day, and then when you are doing one, say for suppose the task one, you do that. At that time, you don't do other things. So that way, again, multitasking is something which somebody actually is very instinctive. I'll say few people are very good at doing one thing at a time. There are other people who are like, they're good at, they get bored so quickly that they prefer to do multiple things at one time. But yes, personally what I believe is, yes, multitasking is possible, but parallel tasking, maybe it degrades the quality.
This was an amazing interaction that we had, and I feel that it was worthy the time we had for. I guess Vibhuti would agree with me for that.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you, Kanksha.
Is the agreement prepared agreement, or you are just saying?
No, I'm definitely something that we have felt throughout the session, definitely. And we're really, really thankful to you for your valuable time. And definitely your advices, they are really helpful for us, and definitely for the whole batch. And we are very glad that you shared that with us.
So I'm really thankful to Bharti sir, Savita ma'am, and our director ma'am, Dr. Dhanya Pramod, for organizing this and conceptualizing this Alumrels initiative. I really feel proud to be a part of SCIT, and thanks to the Alcom team members for organizing this so seamlessly, keeping aside all the technological challenges which we are facing, connecting everyone. We are connecting from our respective homes, and it's wonderful talking to the campus and getting back to my campus life for at least for these hours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We also thank SCIT Director, ma'am, Dr. Dhanya Pramod, Alumni Relations Committee Head, Bharti sir, Savita ma'am, academic coordinators, alumni committee members, and most importantly, SCIT students for being part of this wonderful initiation.
Thank you, one and all. Hope you all got all your right answers. Stay tuned and keep focused. We will be back with the second episode soon. Thank you.